There are men in this world who love quietly, not because they have nothing to say, but because they have decided that the person in front of them is worth more than any word they could offer. Wale was one of those men. For 3.5 years, he worked the night shift at a cold storage facility in Birmingham. 10-hour nights, 6 days a week, in a building that hovered just above freezing, so that his wife, Amara, could complete her residency at one of the city's top teaching hospitals. He did not complain. He did not keep score. He simply showed up every single night because that is what he had promised her he would do. He slept on the couch most days because Amara needed the bedroom dark and quiet for her daytime rest between hospital rotations. He cooked before she woke. He kept the flat clean and the fridge stocked and the bills paid without once letting her see the number on his bank statement after a slow week. He carried all of it, alone, in silence, with love. And then the week Amara received her full consultant offer, the letter she had been working toward her entire adult life, she sat him down at the kitchen table and said something he was not prepared for. She did not shout it, she said it gently, the way you say something you have rehearsed so many times it no longer feels cruel. Wale, I think we both know things have changed between us. My world is different now. The people I work with, the life I build in, you don't fit into it the way you used to. I need you to understand that. He looked at her across the table. The same table where he had sat with her through every late-night study session, every breakdown, every exam she thought she would fail. I don't fit? Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. What Amara did not know, sitting at that kitchen table in her consultant's confidence, was that the very morning she chose to let him go was the morning everything she believed about herself and about him was about to be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. Stay with me, because this is a story about the cost of forgetting who carried you. And as I always say here at Bola's Folktales, God does not sleep, he simply waits. If this is your first time here, welcome. Please like this video, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from. Now settle in. Let us begin. Wale grew up in Ibadan, the kind of city that teaches you early that nothing comes without effort. His father repaired generators in a workshop off the main road. His mother taught primary school for 23 years and never once called it a sacrifice. They were practical people, his parents. They believed that character was built in the small choices, the ones no one applauded. He studied computer science at university, not because it was fashionable, but because he was genuinely good with systems, the way things connected, the way one broken link could unravel an entire process. He had a mind that noticed those things naturally, effortlessly, and he found real satisfaction in fixing what others had given up on. He met Amara at a friend's graduation party in Lagos. She was in her final year of medical school, standing by the window with a drink she wasn't touching, reading something on her phone with that particular focused expression that meant the rest of the room had ceased to exist for her. He walked over out of sheer curiosity. He had never seen anyone look so completely unbothered at a party. They talked for 4 hours about everything: medicine, technology, their families, the kind of Nigeria they had grown up in versus the kind they hoped still existed somewhere. He made her laugh 3 times, real laughter, the kind she was clearly surprised by. She made him think about things he hadn't considered before. By the time the party ended, he knew. They dated for 1.5 years before he proposed. A quiet dinner, no performance. He had bought the ring 3 months earlier and carried it around until the moment felt honest rather than staged. She said yes before he finished the sentence. The opportunity in Birmingham came 8 months after their wedding. A competitive residency placement at a hospital with a strong reputation in her specialism, internal medicine. She was one of 40 applicants accepted from over 400. She called him from the hallway of the assessment center, her voice so unsteady with excitement that he could barely make out the words. He had a good contract in Lagos, a tech consultancy where he was valued, where he was beginning to build something real. He handed in his notice the following Monday without telling her he had done it, because he did not want the decision to feel like a burden she carried. Birmingham received them in October. Grey, damp, brisk. Their flat was on the second floor of a Victorian terrace in Handsworth. High ceilings and drafty windows, and a boiler that needed convincing every winter morning. It was nothing like Lagos, but there was something honest about it, something unpolished and real. And in those first weeks, unpacking boxes together, learning the streets, figuring out which corner shop stocked ogi, it felt like an adventure they were lucky to be sharing. Wale found work within 3 weeks, IT support, then a role with a logistics software firm that appreciated his ability to build systems quickly and cleanly. It was not the trajectory he had imagined for himself in Lagos, but he paid steadily, and steady was what they needed. Amara threw herself into the residency with everything she had. He watched her become, watched her move month by month from the uncertain junior doctor who second-guessed herself at 3 in the morning to someone authoritative, precise, genuinely formidable. He was proud of her in a way that had no language. It lived somewhere below words. He just never imagined that her becoming someone new would require her to decide that he was someone old. The 3rd year was the year Wale stopped sleeping properly. It was not one thing. It was the accumulation. The way a wall does not collapse from one crack, but from 100 small ones that nobody bothers to fill. He was working longer hours because the firm had taken on 3 new contracts, and he was the only one who truly understood the infrastructure. He was also covering more at home because Amara's rotation had intensified. Some weeks she barely surfaced between shifts, moving through the flat like a shadow, too exhausted even to eat unless he put a plate directly in front of her. He did not begrudge her any of it. That is important to understand. He was not doing these things with resentment or with calculation. He was doing them because he loved her, and because the work of loving someone is, often, just this, the 1,000 invisible things you do so they do not have to. He set an alarm 40 minutes before Amara's shifts so he could have a hot meal waiting when she came off the ward. Not always elaborate, sometimes just rice and stew, sometimes eggs, whatever the fridge held, but always hot, always ready, always covered with a plate so it stayed warm if she was running late. He learned the rhythm of her schedule better than she knew it herself. He could tell from the sound of her key in the lock whether she'd had a difficult shift or a manageable one, and he adjusted accordingly. Conversation or quiet, tea or something stronger, space or closeness. He fixed things without being asked. The bathroom tap that had dripped for a month, the kitchen window that wouldn't close properly, the cupboard hinge that made Amara mutter every time she opened it. Small things, invisible things, the kind that only get noticed once they stop being done. He had stopped buying lunch at work entirely. The cafe near the office did a meal deal for £4. Over a month, that was £80, money that could go toward the car insurance or the electricity bill or the quiet shortfall that appeared sometimes at the end of a slow month. He brought food from home instead and ate it at his desk and told no one. His good winter coat, the wool one he'd brought from Lagos, had a lining that had started to separate at the shoulder. He stitched it back himself with a needle and thread he found in a tin under the kitchen sink. He wore it for another full winter. One evening, he came home to find Amara sitting on the floor of the hallway with her back against the wall and her knees drawn up, still in her scrubs. She had not moved farther into the flat. She looked like someone who had run out of the energy required to take one more step. He sat down on the floor beside her, not immediately across from her or standing over her with questions, beside her,
close enough that their shoulders touched. They sat in silence for a while. "Tell me what happened." "A patient died. I made the right calls, everyone said so, but I keep thinking about what I missed at the beginning." "Then let's go through it, from the start." "Wale, you are not a doctor." "No, but you need to talk it through and I need to listen. That's something I can do." She talked for almost 2 hours. He listened, asked careful questions, let her arrive at her own conclusions in her own time. By the end, she was calmer, steadier, able to eat. She went to bed and slept through until morning for the first time in 2 weeks. He stayed up another hour, alone in the kitchen, thinking about nothing in particular. It was around this time that a name began appearing in Amara's conversations. A senior registrar at the hospital, someone called Marcus, well-connected, well-regarded, the kind of person who moved through professional spaces like he had been designed for them. Amara mentioned him lightly, in passing, the way you mention someone whose presence has already become ordinary. Wale noticed. He said nothing. He trusted her completely. Looking back, the trust was never the mistake. Silence was.
Amara's consultant offer came on a Tuesday in April, and for one brief evening, everything was the way it used to be. She called him from the hospital car park, voice cracking, laughing and crying in the same breath, and he stood in the middle of the office floor and did not care who saw the expression on his face. He left early, stopped at a florist, bought the good wine from the shop on the corner, the one they usually walked past because it cost twice as much as the supermarket. He was home before her, the table set, dinner ready, the flat warmer and brighter than usual. When she walked through the door and saw it, she put her hands over her face and wept. "I couldn't have done this without you. You know that, don't you? None of this happens without you." "You did the work. I just kept the lights on." "Don't do that. Don't make yourself small." He smiled, poured her wine. They ate and talked and laughed about the early days, the broken boiler, the neighbor who played gospel music at 7 every Sunday morning, the time the car broke down on the M6, and they spent 3 hours at his services eating bad sandwiches, and somehow it became one of their better memories. It was a good night. It was a real night. He would return to it later, many times, and wonder whether it was already the last one. The change came gradually, the way tides shift. You don't notice until you're standing somewhere you didn't mean to be. Her new consultants cohort had a social culture. Dinners, events, weekend gatherings at houses in Solihull and Edgbaston. She began attending, which was natural, expected, healthy. What was less natural was the way Wale's place in these events slowly became undefined. She would mention something in passing, a dinner, a gathering, and the details would trail off and he would understand without it being said that he was not expected. He told himself she was navigating a new environment, finding her footing. He gave her space. One afternoon, he finished a site visit early and stopped by the hospital to surprise her with coffee and a pastry from the bakery she loved on Broad Street. He found her in the atrium with 2 colleagues laughing at something on someone's phone. When she saw him, the laughter didn't stop exactly, it just shifted slightly, the way a room changes when someone unexpected walks in. She excused herself and came to him. "What are you doing here?" "I was passing. I brought you the almond croissant from that place you like." "You can't just show up at my workplace, Wale. These are my colleagues." He looked at the bag in his hand, then at her. "I'm your husband." "I know that. I'm just asking you to be mindful of where I work." She took the bag, thanked him in a voice that was not unkind, but was somehow further away than the distance between them. Then she went back to her colleagues. He stood in the atrium for a moment, Then he walked out into the afternoon and sat in the car for a while before driving home. 3 days later, he came home in the evening to find her on the phone in the bedroom with the door half closed. He was not trying to listen. He was handing up his coat. "It's complicated, Simi. He's a good person. That's not the question. The question is whether good is enough for the life I'm building, and I genuinely don't know." He stood in the hallway with his coat still in his hand. Then he hung it up, went to the kitchen, started making dinner. When she came out 20 minutes later, nothing in his face showed what he had heard. He was still protecting her even then, even from the knowledge that she had hurt him.
Amara's mother, Mama Amara, landed at Birmingham Airport on a Wednesday morning in September, all the way from Enugu, with enough luggage for a month and the focused energy of a woman who had received a distress call and answered it. She was a formidable woman, broad-shouldered, deliberate, with the particular stillness of someone who had learned that the loudest person in a room is rarely the most powerful. She had retired from 30 years in the civil service. She did not soften things unnecessarily. She looked at what was in front of her and said what she saw. What she saw, arriving at the flat in Handsworth, was a home that spoke of one person's ambition and another person's service. Amara's medical certificates in frames on the wall. Amara's textbooks arranged by the chair she favored. The kitchen kept the way Amara liked it, the schedule on the board reflecting Amara's shifts. Wale's presence in the flat was functional, supportive, almost invisible. Mama Amara noticed this the way experienced people notice things, without showing that she had noticed. She was cordial to Wale. She was polite, but there was a quality to her politeness that had edges. Within the first week, she and Amara began having long, quiet conversations after Wale left for his shift. Conversations that stopped when he returned, or moved to the bedroom, or continued in lowered voices that he did not strain to hear. He was not naive. He understood what was happening. He simply did not know how to stop something that was already in motion and had been, perhaps, for longer than he wanted to admit. Mama Amara's presence changed the flat's temperature. The space that had been Wale's as much as Amara's began slowly to feel like somewhere he was being tolerated. Small things, the way his items were moved without comment, the way meals were cooked for two, Amara and her mother, and he found the kitchen used and closed by the time he came home. The way his working hours were discussed in his presence as though they were a disappointment rather than a contribution. Mama Amara to Amara, not quite loudly enough. A consultant husband should not be coming home smelling of a server room. There is a limit to how long a woman of your standing can explain that. He heard it. He was not meant to, or perhaps he was. The evening that clarified everything happened without drama, which made it worse. Marcus, the registrar from the hospital, came to the flat for dinner. Amara had mentioned it to Wale as a work thing, informal, a colleague she wanted to thank for his mentorship during the final stretch of her residency. Wale had no objection. He had even offered to cook. She said she would handle it. He came home mid-evening to find Marcus already there, comfortable in the living room with a glass of wine, speaking with the ease of a man who did not feel like a guest. Amara was in the kitchen, animated, happy in a way that had a different quality from her happiness around Wale, brighter on the surface, more performed. Marcus looked at Wale when he entered, taking in the lanyard still around his neck, the bag on his shoulder, the specific tiredness of a man coming off a long day. "Evening, you must be..." Before Wale could answer, Mama Amara appeared from the hallway. He is the housemate. He handles the practical things while Amara focuses on her career. Very useful arrangement. The room did not go silent. It continued exactly as it had been. That was somehow the worst part. The world kept moving, and Wale was standing in it as something other than who he was. He looked at Amara. Her eyes were on the kitchen counter. He excused himself, said he had a call to take, went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a long time, listening to the sound of the dinner party in his own home. He did not confront her that night. He did not confront her the night after. What he did, quietly, over the following week, was make a decision.
It was not an argument that ended things. There was no raised voice, no door slammed, no dramatic last word spoken at the foot of the stairs. It was a Sunday. Amara had come home from a night shift, eaten the breakfast he had left covered for her, and gone to sleep without speaking. He had sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours after that, his coffee going cold in front of him, listening to the flat breeze. When she woke in the early afternoon, she came to the kitchen and stood in the doorway. She looked rested. She looked, he thought, like someone who had already had the conversation she was about to have many times in her own head. "I think you know this isn't working anymore." He said nothing. "I'm not saying what you did wasn't... I know what you did, Wale. I'm not pretending otherwise. But I've changed. My life has changed. And I think we'd both be better off if we acknowledged that instead of holding on to something that no longer fits." "No longer fits," he repeated it quietly, as if testing the weight of the phrase. "I don't want to hurt you." And yet, she looked down. He stood up, rinsed his mug, set it on the drying rack the way he always did. He went to the bedroom, took his weekend bag from the top of the wardrobe, and packed with the calm of someone who had, on some level, seen this coming and had already begun grieving it. He did not take much: a week's worth of clothes, his laptop, the small framed photograph from the bedside table, the two of them in Ibadan at his cousin's wedding, before all of this, when the future was still just a hopeful conversation between two people who believed in each other. He stood in the bedroom doorway before he left. "I want you to know that I don't regret any of it. Not the nights, not the couch, not the coat I stitched together because the money was better spent on your exam fees. I did all of it because I chose to, and I choose it again." She said nothing, but her hands, clasped in front of her, tightened slightly. "I hope the life you are building is everything you think it will be." He left. The door closed behind him with a quiet, final click that said nothing and everything. He walked to the end of the street, sat on the low wall outside the park, and let the morning settle around him. It was one of those rare Birmingham days. Clean light, quiet streets, the city not yet fully awake. He put his bag down beside him and breathed. He had known, before he reached into his jacket pocket, that the letter was there. He had been carrying it for over a week without opening it. A registered envelope from a firm of IP solicitors in London, whose name he did not recognize, forwarded from an old address. He had put off opening it because the days had been full, and because something in him had been waiting, without knowing it, for a moment of stillness. This was that moment. He opened it. He read it once, then sat very still. Then he read it again. Years ago, during his last year at university, Wale had written a piece of software as a final year project, a routing optimization tool for supply chain logistics. His supervisor had encouraged him to file a provisional patent. He had done it almost as an exercise, never imagining it would become anything real. Life moved on. Lagos happened. Amara happened. Birmingham happened. He had forgotten entirely that the patent existed. The letter informed him that a supply chain technology firm operating in North America and Europe had been found through independent audit to have incorporated his patented methodology into their core platform without license.
They had been doing so commercially for 4 years. The solicitors had been retained by a third party who had identified the infringement during a due diligence review. They were writing to ask whether Wale wished to pursue a claim. He looked up at the Birmingham sky. He thought about the coat with the stitched lining. He thought about the lunch he had stopped buying. He thought about the mat he had never once complained about sleeping on. Then he put the letter carefully back in the envelope, picked up his bag, and walked.
Wale did not tell a single person. He found a serviced apartment near Brindley Place, clean, neutral, functional, and paid for a month upfront. He slept in an actual bed for the first time in longer than he could properly calculate. He ate a proper breakfast. He called the solicitors in London the following morning and spent 40 minutes on the phone with a woman named Claire, who spoke with the brisk confidence of someone very good at her job. What she described was not instant. It was a process: correspondence, documentation, negotiation. The infringing company had already been alerted, and their legal team had indicated a willingness to settle rather than litigate. This, Claire explained, was actually the better outcome: cleaner, faster. The figure she mentioned, conservatively, made him set down his coffee cup very carefully on the desk. He asked her to proceed. It took 11 weeks. During those 11 weeks, Wale existed in a kind of suspension, showing up to his regular job, eating regular meals, living in the serviced apartment with its neutral walls and its undisturbed quiet. He did not reach out to Amara. He did not post on social media. He did not discuss any of it with family or friends. He had become, in some ways, invisible, which was a strange thing to discover he was comfortable with. The settlement arrived on a Thursday. He sat with it for a week before he did anything. He was not by nature an impulsive man. He thought in systems. He considered the inputs and the outputs and the second-order effects that most people never stopped to examine. So he sat with the number and he thought about what it meant and what he actually wanted from whatever came next. What he wanted, he discovered, was not grandeur. He wanted solidity. He wanted to build something real on a foundation that belonged entirely to him. He engaged a business broker. He began looking at small to medium technology firms in the Midlands that were undercapitalized but structurally sound, companies with good core products that lacked the investment to scale. He found one within 2 months, a Birmingham-based logistics software firm whose founder was looking to exit. The due diligence took 3 weeks. The acquisition was quiet, professional, and entirely unremarkable to anyone who was not paying close attention. He moved into a flat in the jewelry quarter, real furniture, high ceilings, light. He bought a new coat. He had 3 suits made by a tailor on Vice Street who took his measurements twice and did not rush. He was not performing wealth. He was simply, for the first time in 4 years, dressing like a man who had stopped apologizing for existing. From a careful distance, he watched what was happening in Amara's world. She and Marcus had moved into a rented house in Harborne. He saw the evidence gradually on mutual friends' social media, in the way her location tags shifted. It looked from the outside like exactly the life she had told herself she deserved. The dinners, the events, the photographs in which she looked polished and purposeful and right. He did not feel what he expected to feel looking at those photographs. He had braced for pain and found instead a quiet, clear sadness, the kind that does not destabilize, that simply acknowledges what has been lost. Marcus, it turned out, had his own complexities. Amara had believed she was choosing freedom and arrived instead at a different set of constraints, this time without someone who knew how to sit with her on the hallway floor. The relationship became publicly strained within 5 months. By the 7th month, Marcus had relocated to a new post in Edinburgh, and Amara did not appear in his photographs anymore. The hospital restructured.
A funding review resulted in the suspension of 2 senior clinical contracts, Amara's among them. She was told she remained in good standing and would be prioritized for reinstatement, but the timeline was uncertain. 6 months, perhaps, more. She moved back to the Handsworth flat, which she had kept. Mama Amara returned to Enugu. The flat was quiet in a way it had never been before. The letter from the property management company arrived on a Monday.
The letter was formal and unremarkable on the surface. A request for an in-person meeting regarding the pending rent review for her flat at the offices of the new property management firm that had acquired her building's freehold 3 months prior. The address was in the business district. The appointment slot was a Wednesday at 11. Amara dressed carefully. She had learnt somewhere along the way that clothes are a kind of armor. The building was modern, glass-fronted, the lobby understated in the particular way of places that do not need to announce their seriousness. A receptionist directed her to the 4th floor. A PA met her at the lift and walked her to an office at the end of a corridor, corner-facing, quietly impressive, with a wide desk and a view of the city that took in the whole skyline. She sat. She waited. The door opened. Wale walked in. He was wearing a charcoal suit that had been cut with quiet precision. His posture was the same as it had always been, not stiff, not performative, just present, the way certain people are simply present in a room without working at it. He looked rested. He looked like himself, only settled, like a man who had stopped carrying something heavy and had been that way long enough to forget he was ever carrying it. He sat across from her without hurry. He placed a slim folder on the desk and left it closed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amara, barely above a whisper, "Wale, you are here about the building." His voice was even, not cold, not warm, even. Wale said, "The freehold was acquired by my company in March. I became aware your flat was in the portfolio about 6 weeks after the acquisition. I didn't engineer that, I want to be clear. It was coincidence. But it did give me a reason to think carefully about what fairness actually looks like." He opened the folder, placed one document on the desk between them. It was not a legal notice. It was a photograph, small, slightly worn at the corner, printed on ordinary paper. The 2 of them in Ibadan, his cousin's wedding, years ago, before any of this. She was laughing at something. He was watching her laugh with an expression that anyone could read. Wale said, "I carried that in my wallet for 3 years. I didn't take it out of sentiment. I took it because I wanted to remember, on the hard nights, what I was doing it for." She was looking at the photograph. Her jaw was tight. Wale said, "You are on the standard tenancy terms. 60 days notice if you choose to leave, 60 days on our side if we ever needed you to. I'm not moving you on. That's not why I asked you here." Amara said, "Then why?" Wale said, "Because I needed you to know one thing." He leaned forward slightly. Wale said, "When you told me I didn't fit your world anymore, I want you to understand that the man you were talking about, the man who stitched his own coat and ate bread at his desk and slept on a sofa so you could rest, that man was not beneath you. He was simply further along than you recognized. And that is not a criticism. Growth takes time. But you made a decision about who I was based on what I looked like in the middle of the story. And I think somewhere underneath everything, you know that." Her eyes were full. She did not let them spill. Amara said, "I know what I did." Wale said, "I believe you." A silence. Amara said, "I'm sorry, Wale. I know that doesn't fix anything." Wale said, "No, but it's true, and that matters." He stood. He picked up the photograph and held it for a moment,
then set it back on the desk in front of her. "Keep it. I have another copy." He walked to the door. His hand rested on the frame for just a moment. Wale said, "I hope you find your way back to yourself, Amara. I genuinely mean that." He left. The office was very still. Outside the window, Birmingham carried on. Buses, cranes, the ordinary motion of a city that did not pause for private reckonings. Amara sat for a long time. She picked up the photograph. She looked at it for a while. Then she put it in her bag, stood up, and walked to the lift. She did not take the bus home. She walked. Birmingham in November has a particular quality. The light low and golden in the late afternoon, the streets full of people moving with purpose, the city carrying the hum of a place that is always somewhere in the middle of becoming something. She walked through it slowly, her bag against her side, the photograph inside it. She called her mother from the bench in Victoria Square, where the fountains were switched off for winter and the pigeons moved in slow, unbothered circles. Mama Amara was back in Enugu by now, but she answered on the second ring. "I saw Wale today." A pause. "And?" He owns the building I live in. He owns the management company. He built it from nothing, from a patent he filed in university and forgot about. He built all of it while I was... She stopped. "Mama Amara, while you were what?" "While I was deciding he wasn't enough." Silence on the line. "Amara, I told you I had outgrown him. You told me a woman in my position needed someone who matched it. That's what you said, Mama. Those were your words. I wanted the best for you. The best was already there. He was already there. He was in the kitchen before I woke. He was on the floor so I could sleep. He was at the hospital with a croissant, and I told him not to come to my workplace." Her voice broke on the last word. She held herself together. "I told a good man that he didn't fit, and you helped me believe it." Mama Amara said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I did not see him clearly. I saw his shoes and his job and the smell of the office, and I made a judgment. I was wrong." It was perhaps the most honest thing her mother had ever said to her. Amara sat with it. "I need to figure out a lot of things, but I needed to say that." She hung up. She sat on the bench a while longer, the city moving around her, and she thought about the hallway floor and the flask of tea passed through the doorway in the mornings and the way he had sat beside her, close enough for their shoulders to touch without being asked. She had been so busy learning to become someone that she had forgotten to stay someone. Across the city, Wale was in his kitchen making tea. The flat was warm. The light was good. Through the window, he could see the rooftops of the jewelry quarter, the city he had arrived in as an extension of someone else's story and had somehow, quietly, made his own. He was not without grief. He had examined himself honestly and found the grief there, not sharp anymore, but present, the way a healed bone still registers in cold weather. But underneath it, clear and steady, was something he had not expected to find so soon. Peace. He had loved someone fully and freely and without condition. He had not been loved back in the same way, and that was its own kind of sorrow. But the love itself, what he had given, how he had given it, that was entirely his. No one could reach back through time and take from him what he had genuinely been. That, my friends, is the thing they never tell you about loving someone well. Even when they leave, even when they look past you, even when they whisper your name to a stranger like it is something to be ashamed of, The love you gave from an honest heart remains yours. It does not diminish, it does not expire. And as my grandmother used to say, the hand that gives in truth is never left empty for long. God saw what Wale carried, and in his time, he made a way. If this story stayed with you, please like this video and leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you are new to this channel, welcome. You are home. This is Bola's Folktales, where every story carries a truth worth sitting with. Subscribe and never miss another one.